Hello, this is Lee on PublicLee speaking, and on this week's episode, I'll be reviewing the book Feed. This is Feed, the futuristic cyberpunk dystopian young adult novel by M.T. Anderson, not the Bloggers and Zombies book by Mira Grant. Feed is a novel that, in equal parts, interested, engaged, and enraged me in that order. As is the norm for books that I enjoy, I won't spoil the plot, but I will discuss the underlying theme of the book and why the book works as well as it does. So, the premise. Feed is a novel set in a technologically advanced future. However, instead of jetpacks and laser guns, technology has gone down a more Wi-Fi Facebook route. This is both to the book's credit and depressingly easy to envision as a reality. One of the main forces in the book is the feed net, which is essentially the internet on crack. This is because 3/4 of Americans have a cybernetic implant in their brain which allows them to access the feed with their thoughts. This has all sorts of secondary uses and connotations which are surprisingly well fleshed out within the book, including the fact that it gives the feed users a sort of technological telepathy via instant messenger. This leads to the situation common in psychic sci-fi novels, where those with telepathy can ostracize, exclude, demean, and discriminate against those without this ability by talking about them and insulting them while they are standing there unaware of it. Before I move on to the main theme of this novel, which will be the secondary topic of this video, I must first talk about some of the ways this novel truly works. The use of language in this book is amazing. Many times, when authors are trying to come up with societies that are similar to ours but very different, they do so through the use of fictional slang. Normally, this turns out very badly, as the slang makes no sense at all, or does not twist the language in the way that organic slang does. The reason for this is that slang does make sense, at least to those who use it, and those underlying reasons have to exist, and without them, the author has to make them up from nowhere, and thus they don't flow. This is not the case here. Additionally, all of the characters come off as people, which might sound obvious, but most characters in literature do not. Writing realistic characters is hard, and Mr. Anderson does so extraordinarily well. This makes their failings that much more painful, as they cannot be dismissed as flat characters, their actions only done at the whims of the author, but they are actual people who, if they actually existed, would make these mistakes and act these ways. These complete characters help highlight the main theme of the novel and allow both sides to be represented without resorting to straw man stereotypes. The base theme is one whose sides are embodied in the newer and older generations of today. The question is, at what point is the memorization of information useless when one can look up information faster and easier than one could ever memorize it? At what point is memorization a waste of effort when one can just Google it? This question used to be more of an academic problem, one with little impact on everyday life. However, with the advent of smartphones, this is becoming a much more pressing issue, as there are people who are connected to the internet 24/7. At what point, if there is a point, does memorization become useless when one can look up information in an instant? This divide is encompassed nicely in the male and female protagonists of Titus and Violet. While they both have the implant that allows them to access the feed, Violet received hers later in life and is homeschooled while Titus goes to school, trademarked, to learn to better utilize the feed. But given Titus's use of the feed within the novel, one wonders what they do all day, since his use is obviously not optimized, and it is subtle, but it is shown. Violet, on the other hand, has a much greater vocabulary and knowledge base to pull from internally, and while she does use the feed, she would rather use her own mind. This dichotomy is both what interests Titus in Violet, but also creates a divide between them, as Violet's knowledge makes Titus feel stupid. As is unfortunately often the case, Titus, the uninformed, becomes incredibly insecure by his lack of knowledge, and instead of attempting to seek more on his own, he instead passively resents Violet for her knowledge and reads condescension and contempt where Violet only expresses curiosity. That's as much as I can give about the plot, because as they get more used to each other's differences, things get worse. This is not a happy book, although it is one that should be read because of the messages contained within. There is quite a lot that I haven't mentioned here. For instance, due to the uber-corporatization of America, Earth has become the toxic pit that only exists in the worst of Al Gore's most apocalyptic nightmares. The two main characters make a trip to the ocean, and from inside their protective suits, marvel at its rainbow-hued waves. The fact that they are the only living things there is so small a point as to almost not be mentioned. Not only is the planet sick, but the people are too, but no one seems to care. This book is great, and if you haven't read it yet, you should. On one level, I absolutely despise this book, but that's more due to the fact that in this book, humanity fails pretty hard, and I hate seeing that happen. On every other level, however, I really, really like this book, and it should be read. It's exactly 300 pages long, and it's a bit of a quick read for that length. I read it in 4 hours, and it shouldn't take more than an afternoon or two for most readers. In short, this book is very well written, and has very interesting and poignant messages, and should be read. This is Lee, publicly speaking, and signing off.
You're no one if you're not on Twitter, and if you aren't there already, you've missed it. If you haven't been bookmarked, retweeted, and blogged, you might as well not have existed. You might as well not have existed.